Cheerio. Kyungye. Hi everybody, welcome to Taekwon-Do Thursday. Last week we talked about stances that had 1.5 shoulder width in common, whether it's length or width. And we talked about how they relate to each other. This week I want to follow up by focusing on stances that have 1 shoulder width in common. So let's start off with two of our more basic stances, the parallel ready stance and the walking stance. So we know that the parallel ready stance is 1 shoulder width wide from the foot sword to the foot sword. Now that's really important that we say foot sword to foot sword, because if it was 1 shoulder width from reverse foot sword to reverse foot sword, you can see it looks quite different because it has a combined width of both my feet in difference. So look, you can see there it makes a big difference than when I do it correctly, which is 1 shoulder width from foot sword to foot sword. Now that we've talked about that, let's see how that relates to walking stance. Well, the walking stance width is also 1 shoulder width, but it's from the center of the instep to the center of the instep. That means the 2 white lines that I've marked run down the center of my feet, not on the inside of my feet, not on the outside of my feet, but the centers of my feet. To compare the two together, if my stance, which is 1 shoulder width from foot sword to foot sword, if I step into walking stance and my feet now need to be on the lines, they're running down the centers of my feet, well, the actual difference in the stance width is 1 foot, as in the width of my foot. Hope this is making sense to you. See, if the lines are running down the centers of my feet, a half foot on this side, half foot on this side, difference is a combination of 1 foot width. So from here, as I step into my walking stance, in real terms, I'm widening my stance by the width of my foot. Okay, so when people are stepping from parallel ready stance to walking stance, your walking stance feels slightly wider because these lines, instead of being in line with the outsides of my feet, the foot sword, they would technically be running down the centers of my feet when I'm in the walking stance. So when you're stepping out, make sure that your walking stance is slightly wider than your parallel ready stance, because we're not measuring from foot sword to foot sword, we're measuring from center of instep to center of instep. Hope that makes sense to you. Go back and watch this a few times if you need to understand this. Let's move on to some of the more advanced stances that involve using 1 shoulder width as their length. We're going to look at the rear foot stance first. The rear foot stance is 1 shoulder width from foot sword, so I place my foot sword on that line, to big toe on the front foot. So it's quite a short stance. We'll get into the weight distribution on another day. For now, let's just focus on the length. So foot sword to big toe is 1 shoulder width, and you can see from the lines that I've done that measurement. Now if we look at vertical stance is also 1 shoulder width long, but it's not from foot sword to toe, it's from reverse foot sword. That means I need to move my back foot to the outside of that line. There's other changes to make as well, such as the angles of the feet. As I said, we're going to focus on that another day. For now, let's just talk about the length. So to convert the length from rear foot stance to vertical stance, we just move the foot out to the other side of that line. And now it's 1 shoulder width from reverse foot sword to big toe. And that is another video of showing you how the stances relate to each other based on their length or width. Hope that helps. Cheerio. Kyungye.